guys in the dark.
In 1991, at the age of 26, my name is Angel, was dating a man named Joe. He was 24 years old. We'd known each other for 5 years, had been sexual for the last 3. The attraction was mutual. Joe pursued me equally, as I did with him. Joe lived with his mother, who'd never approved of the friendship. She had been vocal about her objections on a number of occasions, but the two of us continued to see each other, until she had pressed charges against me. Joe had been diagnosed with a learning disability as a child. Joe happened to have a job, bought his own clothing, did everything for himself, even though he lived at home with his mother. Yes, it's true, when he tried to use big words, he would mix them up a lot, but he seemed really normal. No one would ever think that there was anything wrong with him, not according to his mother, and more crucially, not according to the law. She had taken Joe to the police along with documentation of his disability, and had claimed at the time that her son was retarded and being taken advantage of, sexually, by me. Shortly thereafter, I was charged with sodomy 1, a crime that carries a 15 to 25-year prison term if convicted. My lawyer advised me to a plea bargain. Although I had obviously no criminal record, the lawyer had felt that the jury would sympathize with Joe and his mother, thinking that a man had been, in effect, repeatedly raped over the course of 3 years. A bad image for the jury, indeed. The plea bargain sentence was 4 to 12 years, with a good probability of parole at the low end. I had taken the deal. Kind of felt like I had no choice. On the inside, the prison horrors began, on Rikers Island. The officers there were worse than the inmates. They sold drugs to the prisoners. They had beaten them, gambled, and ignored rapes. While in there, I had seen a lot of used needles. I was lucky. Although I was gay, I was able to hide it, so I wasn't prey to being raped. I did have lots of sex, though. They have a separate section for gay men. In this section, you can have sex anywhere. No one stops it. You sign yourself in to a form stating that you're gay. You sign yourself out with a reverse form stating that you no longer think that you're gay and feel comfortable in the general population. Many times I signed myself in and out on the same day. I speculated that this must provide some measure of protection against all that. But it definitely didn't. If somebody wanted to, they would. They would sign themselves into this area, for the day at least, get you, and then they would sign themselves out. The situation with young people in prison who are first-time offenders do get raped regularly. They're called sweet boys. Guys use them, then pass them along to their friends. When things get bad enough, they go into protective custody, but that's no good. It's just like that house that you go into to sign yourself in. Anyone can say that they need protective custody, get admitted, and then settle a score with you. That isn't the answer, really. There is no answer. There's no safe place in jail. Physical protection is only one of the issues. There's no sexual protection in jails either. They weren't encouraged while I was there, or discussed. Everyone there had sex. Even the straight guys do it. Before entering jail, I was HIV negative. I had tested myself a few months before the trial. Shortly after entering prison, I found out that I was positive. A lot of times I would see that people would put bed sheets up on their cells, and then bring someone in there and do their deed. No one questioned anything, and no one cared. And if someone did, all people would say is that they needed the privacy to use the toilet, and that would be that. During my time in there, I did get sent to different prisons in New York State. Some of them were maximum security institutions, and that was just because they didn't want the guards to get too familiar with the inmates, or for the prisoners to learn the administrative procedures. There was strict security, because a lot of the inmates were far too dangerous, and their families are pretty far away. It's isolated. Prisoners get very edgy when they don't get visits. Attica and Clinton were the worst for violence, but in all of them, the guards act like they don't see what's going on, especially if it's at the end of their shift. It takes too long to file any reports. I did go to some prisons that were cooking facilities, where you can get larger drums in the yard, where you can cook, or you can cook in your own cell. You're supposed to only use plastic pots. Metal could be used for violence. You can have a water heater and cook a lot of things on that. You can buy a lot of the food from the prison, or you can have it brought in from the outside. Some of the guards would extort the prisoners, and they would bring in food from the outside at a very high price. There was also a few good ones that would just do it out of the kindness of their heart. At one point in time, I thought one of the guards was being nice by bringing me groceries for no charge. Shortly after he asked if he could eat with me, I began to realize that he was attracted to me. One night he asked if we could be friends. I knew what he meant by that. But I asked him anyways, "What do you mean? We're already friends, right?" He said, "Well, you know, really good friends." I said, "Oh, like special friends?" He immediately said yes. Shortly thereafter, we ended up having sex. Our affair continued until the guard got transferred. It was quite a while later after that. For some time, we had corresponded by mail, but we eventually lost contact. Last I heard, the guard is now divorced, living in a remote upstate town. Upon my 4-year parole review, I was excited about the possibility of being freed. I was asked whether I felt remorse for my crime. I said in all sincerity, there never was a crime in the first place, so there's no remorse to be felt. They didn't like that at all, so they denied my parole. I learned quickly that you have to tell them that you're sorry, even if you didn't do anything wrong. I never made that mistake again. Shortly thereafter, I had came up for parole once again. This time I admitted the all-important remorse. I was freed on conditional release, but I committed a parole violation, going out of state without permission. I knew that I shouldn't have left New York without advising my parole officer, but I thought that I was only going away for the weekend. Once I got to Virginia Beach, I was having a good time and decided to stay. It was my own fault, I know. I knew I should have reported that I was missing, but I didn't. I paid for that mistake later on. One time when I was in Sing Sing, there was a 3-week lockdown. That means that there was no visitors, no nothing. All this because they found a 9mm gun and 2 clips of ammo in an inmate's cell. And these were a plant by a guard who was looking to get even with this inmate. You couldn't possibly get a 9mm into Sing Sing. They strip search you every single time you re-enter the facility. During lockdown, people usually get really panic-stricken. No one comes out of the cell. You can only shower once a week. There's no visitors. Inmates can't get their supplies brought in. I was prepared for this. I've been keeping a lockdown stash in my cell with cigarettes, coffee, various food items that I would need. Other inmates weren't quite prepared, and they often aren't. Thus, behavior becomes even more quirky and dangerous during a prolonged lockdown. Once they actually sent me to a permanent lockdown jail, Southport. They shut down 23 hours every single day. It's a bad place to be. You wind up in Southport if you've been in jail a very long time and keep getting transferred. Also, if you go into protective custody too often, they ship you to Southport. It's full of some of the worst long-term prisoners I've ever seen. There was one time that I needed to go see a dentist in one of the jails. I found out after telling one of the dentists that I was HIV positive that they forced me to write a letter just so I can get some dental care. They'll find excuses not to treat you if you do. And unless you keep up the pressure, you'll never get your teeth taken care of at all. If you happen to have anything, the other prisoners will treat you like you have the plague. They never found out about me, though, because I never needed meds. I just took vitamins, and thank God I had stayed healthy this entire time. After getting out of jail after almost 11 years, seeing all of this on top of so much more, while being transferred back and forth between prison cells, I'm definitely optimistic about my future. I don't really have any bitterness about the past 11 years. I'm working now. I'm quite healthy. Sometimes I even think about contacting that corrections officer that I had an affair with. He was a really nice guy. There's other days that I just think about it and shrug it off, thinking that it's just the past and I need to move on. I wasn't an inmate, but I was a guard. I have a couple of different stories, but the one that always got me was when I was walking down the mile to get to another block, and the inmate in front of me decides the 5'4" female guard was the one that he was going to let his anger out on. She stopped him to ask where he was going, And if he was okay considering this certain inmate was normally a happy person, when he stopped, he just started hitting her over and over again. Before I could tackle him and yell for help, he managed to break her jaw and fracture her cheekbones. By the end of it all, he had to be taken to the infirmary as well for some broken bones. Some of the guards were less than happy to see almost 6-foot inmate beating on a guard, let alone one that would have hard enough time defending herself if she knew it was coming. Another time, I was doing my count, and the inmates on row 3 started yelling for a boss. That's what they say when they call guards. When I got up to see what was going on, one of the inmates in the first cell had his pants on his ankles, a shiv in his hand, and was wiping what I found out to be his own blood, despite there not being any visible cuts on his arms or legs. I couldn't see his midsection due to his long shirt. He looked me dead in the eyes and said that I'm the rosary, and my blood is the ash. I will cleanse this place of all that believe in the false God above. All the while his cellmate was in the back with his hands up saying that I haven't touched him. After getting the Sarge on duty, he was taken to the infirmary. I was told that he is known for doing this kind of thing to get transferred to our psych ward during the summer. Our unit was a concrete building with no AC in Texas. Needless to say, it got super hot even at night. I worked in prison as a nurse. Sometimes severely aggressive or mentally unstable inmates were placed in the chair. This was always a temporary thing, though. It's basically a big black chair that after the inmate is handcuffed to legs and feet, he or she is tied to this chair to contain them. Because this risks their circulation being cut off, there is always required to be a nurse to be present so that they could check pulses every 15 minutes in the hands and feet. They were let out of the chair every 2 hours for a 15-minute period to walk around the cell. So an inmate on PCP comes into the prison intake, wild and combative. He is immediately put into the chair by a set of 5 trained correction officers in SWAT-like gear. I was called from the medical unit to be assigned to monitor his circulation. He's acting out of it, but other than some yelling, he was pretty calm about me being there. But he can also only be so wild when he's tied up to a chair anyways. The 2-hour time frame was reached, so that he can walk around the cell. As soon as he had his handcuffs unlocked, he went completely insane, biting the officers in the arms and shoulders and head, butting them as well as punching them in the face. I had to run out of the cell and back off as quickly as I could. I managed to get out just fine, but the officers had to restrain him immediately once again. All 5 had to go to the hospital for either broken bones, stitches, or chunks bitten out of their arms. It was all pretty horrific. Less bloody in a way. But there was a woman there who was developmentally delayed. She had tried to wipe out her mother. And while the mother was escaping, she ran her over, put it in reverse, and floored it back over her once again. And finally, put it in drive over her one last time. The mother was actually extremely abusive, and was in the same prison in a different part. The daughter would always have her arms inside of her shirt. You'd only see her arms when she was sitting like eating or something else. She was across from me one day eating. I see her drop a pile of something. I immediately was like, what the fuck is that? You can't have stuff in the chow hall. What is this girl doing? It was kind of loud when she dropped it, so it wasn't laundry. It looked kind of like meat. How and why does she have meat? We're eating spaghetti right now. That's when I find out that it's her intestines and her guts, just falling out of her torso onto the floor. She's struggling to gather all of it up. It looks pretty slippery. After that, I noticed her dropping her guts onto the floor on a regular basis, and had to stop being around her at all. It smelled to me, and the other girls would have her pull it out sometimes. It was really fucking gross. I'm not sure why they didn't just sew her up and make it to where she couldn't do that ever again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.